The interview was a disaster from the start. Celia March sat in a waiting room that cost more than her yearly salary, clutching a portfolio of credentials she was certain wouldn't matter. The agency had been vague: wealthy family, private estate, child with special needs. But the armed guards at the gate and the tension radiating from every staff member told a different story. This wasn't a family. This was a fortress. She should leave, should thank them for their time and walk back to her cramped apartment and her stack of rejection letters and her dwindling savings. But the agency had mentioned the salary. Obscene, impossible, the kind of money that could pay off her student loans and finally let her breathe. And desperation made people stupid. So she stayed. "Mr. Conti will see you now." The assistant who led her through marble hallways moved like a woman navigating a minefield. Quick steps, downcast eyes, the particular hunch of shoulders that came from working in proximity to danger. The office they entered was all dark wood and darker shadows. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked grounds that stretched toward a distant tree line. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked more like armor than literature. And behind the desk sat the most dangerous man Celia had ever seen. Matteo Conti rose as she entered, and the air in the room seemed to compress. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders that filled his charcoal suit like it had been sewn onto his body. Dark hair, silvered at the temples. A face carved from granite, all sharp angles and barely contained intensity. And eyes, God, his eyes, black as midnight, watching her with the particular focus of a predator assessing prey. "Miss March." His voice was low, rough, accented in ways that made her think of old Italian films. "Please, sit." She sat because her legs had forgotten how to hold her upright. "Your credentials are impressive." He remained standing, a deliberate power play she recognized from every interview she'd ever failed. Master's degree in child psychology, specialization in trauma and selective mutism, 5 years at the Whitmore Institute before their funding collapsed. His eyes never left her face. "You've worked with difficult cases." "I prefer complex. Children aren't difficult. They're communicating in the only ways they know how." Something flickered in his expression. Interest, maybe. Or surprise. "My daughter is 5 years old. Her name is Valentina." He moved to the window, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Her mother died 18 months ago. Since then, Valentina has spoken exactly 7 words. 3 of them were mama in the weeks after the funeral. The rest have been scattered, single syllables, usually at night, usually in distress." Celia's heart clenched. Selective mutism following trauma was her specialty, but the clinical understanding did nothing to dull the ache of imagining a 5-year-old drowning in grief she couldn't voice. "I've hired specialists, the best in the country." Matteo's voice hardened. "They lasted weeks, days in one case. Valentina won't engage with them, won't even enter the same room sometimes." He turned to face her, and she saw something beneath the granite. Exhaustion, desperation, the particular helplessness of a parent watching their child disappear. "I'm running out of options, Miss March." "Why me? There are more experienced therapists, people with better—" "Your former patients." He cut her off. "I had you investigated. 3 children with trauma-induced mutism, all speaking again within a year. The mother of one of them wrote a letter to the Whitmore board when you were laid off. She said you didn't treat her son like a problem to be solved. She said you saw him." The memory surfaced. Little Daniel, who'd stopped speaking after witnessing his father's heart attack. It had taken 8 months of patience, of meeting him where he was, of never pushing. The day he'd said her name had been one of the best of her life. "I don't guarantee results," she said carefully. "Healing isn't linear, and if your daughter doesn't feel safe with me, then you'll leave." "I understand." Mateo's jaw tightened. But I need you to try. He stopped, swallowed. The crack in his armor was brief but devastating. She's all I have left, and I'm losing her. Celia should ask more questions, should demand to know why there were guards at every door, why the staff moved like ghosts, why a man with this much money and power couldn't find a single person to help his daughter. Instead, she said, I'd like to meet her first, before I decide anything. Something shifted in Mateo's expression. Not relief. He was too controlled for that. But something close. This way. He led her through the house, past rooms she glimpsed only briefly. A kitchen gleaming with professional equipment, a dining hall sized for 40, a conservatory filled with plants and light. The contrast between the fortress-like exterior and these spaces felt deliberate, like someone had tried to build softness inside walls designed for war. They stopped at a door painted pale pink, jarring against the estate's dark elegance. She'll be inside, with her nanny. Mateo's hand rested on the doorknob but didn't turn it. She may not acknowledge you, may not even look at you. Please don't take it personally. I never do. He opened the door. The nursery was beautiful. Soft colors, comfortable furniture, shelves lined with toys and books that showed signs of regular use. Sunlight streamed through windows overlooking a garden, and in a patch of golden light sat the smallest, most solemn child Celia had ever seen. Valentina Conti had her father's dark hair and her own enormous eyes, not black like his, but a startling honey gold that caught the light and held it. She sat cross-legged on a rug, surrounded by crayons and paper, her small body curved protectively over whatever she was creating. The nanny, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, rose as they entered, relief evident in every line of her face. Mr. Conti, she's been quiet today, drawing mostly. Thank you, Maria. You can take a break. The nanny fled with undisguised gratitude, and Celia filed that away as another piece of the puzzle. Mateo crouched near his daughter, maintaining careful distance. Valentina, this is Miss March. She's going to be spending some time with us. No response. The crayon kept moving. Red, pressing hard enough to dent the paper. Celia didn't approach, didn't crouch. She simply sat down where she was, cross-legged on the floor, and pulled her own small sketchbook from her bag. I'm going to draw too, she said to no one in particular. I'm not very good at it, but I like the colors. She began sketching. Nothing elaborate, just a simple cat with two big eyes and a curly tail. The kind of drawing a child might make. The kind that said, I'm not here to test you or fix you. I'm just here. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Mateo stood by the door, his tension palpable, watching his daughter ignore the stranger who was supposed to save her. Then Valentina looked up. Not at Celia. At her sketchbook. At the cat taking shape on the page. Something flickered in those golden eyes. Interest. Curiosity. A spark of something that hadn't quite been extinguished by grief. She didn't speak, didn't move, but she looked. And for Celia, that was enough. I'll take the job, she said to Mateo without looking away from her drawing, on one condition. Name it. I work on her timeline, not yours, not the nanny's, not anyone else's. If she needs a year of silence, she gets a year. If she needs to draw angry pictures for 6 months, that's what we do. She finally met his eyes. You're not hiring me to fix your daughter, Mr. Conti. You're hiring me to wait with her until she's ready to find her own way back. The silence stretched. Mateo's jaw worked, and she could see the war in him, the part that wanted control, wanted timelines, wanted his daughter returned to him whole and speaking and healed. Agreed, he said finally. Whatever she needs. Good. Celia turned back to her drawing. Then we have a deal. She didn't notice Valentina's hand creeping across the floor until small fingers brushed the edge of her sketchbook. Celia went still, barely breathing, as the little girl studied her half-finished cat. Valentina's other hand moved, picked up a yellow crayon, and slowly, carefully, added a sun to the corner of Celia's page. Then she retreated to her own drawing, golden eyes downcast, tiny body curved over her secrets. Celia's throat tightened. It wasn't speech, it wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. Later, after Valentina had been handed off to Maria for dinner, and Celia had agreed to start the following morning, she found herself alone in the hallway outside the nursery. The door had been left ajar, and something on the small table near the window caught her eye. A piece of paper, covered in the same red crayon Valentina had been using. Celia knew she shouldn't look. This was the child's private space, her private thoughts. But something about the intensity of those red marks pulled at her. The same instinct that had made her good at her job. She stepped closer, looked down, and her blood turned to ice. The drawing was crude, a child's rendering, barely legible, but the message was clear. A tall figure in black, a smaller figure with yellow hair. Valentina, obviously, hiding behind a door. And in wobbly, desperate letters, 3 words that no 5-year-old should know how to write. Please save Daddy. Celia stared at the note. At the terror embedded in every crayon stroke. At the plea from a child who'd stopped speaking but hadn't stopped seeing. Valentina wasn't just grieving her mother. She was terrified of losing her father, too. And whatever danger haunted this house, whatever had put guards at every gate and fear in every staff member's eyes, the little girl understood it better than anyone realized. Celia folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her pocket. She'd come here for a job. Now she was in the middle of something far more complicated, and she had no idea how to walk away. The first week taught Celia that the Conti estate ran on silence and secrets. She arrived each morning at 8, was escorted to the nursery by staff who never made eye contact, and spent her days in Valentina's quiet orbit. They drew together, built block towers that Valentina knocked down with controlled precision, read picture books that the little girl studied with an intensity far beyond her years. Valentina never spoke, but she communicated, in the way she positioned her body, in the drawings she left scattered across the nursery floor, in the rare moments when her golden eyes met Celia's and held. The note burned in Celia's pocket. Please save Daddy. She hadn't shown it to Matteo, hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Some instinct told her that this secret belonged to Valentina, that exposing it would shatter whatever fragile trust was building between them. But she watched, observed, catalogued every detail the way her training had taught her. The guards who rotated in shifts, their weapons barely concealed. The phone calls that pulled Matteo away at odd hours, leaving him gray-faced and tense. The way certain names made the staff go rigid. Barone, she heard once, whispered like a curse. The cars that came and went at night, headlights sweeping across her window in the staff quarters she'd been given. By the end of the second week, she understood. Matteo Conti wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in ways that didn't appear on tax returns. And someone wanted that power badly enough to make a 5-year-old fear for her father's life. She should leave, should take the first paycheck and run back to her safe, small, struggling life. But every morning, Valentina waited by the nursery window, watching for Celia's arrival. And every morning, something in those golden eyes made leaving impossible. You're good with her. Matteo's voice startled her. She hadn't heard him enter. The man moved like smoke when he wanted to. She's easy to be good with. Celia kept her eyes on Valentina, who was arranging colored blocks into patterns only she understood. She's brilliant, you know. The way she categorizes, the complexity of her drawings. She's processing at a level most adults couldn't manage. Her mother was a mathematician. Before... He stopped. The silence that followed was heavy with everything he couldn't say. Tell me about her. The request came out before Celia could stop it. Valentina's mother. What was she like? Matteo moved to the window, his back to the room, his reflection ghosting across the glass. Lucia was light, the brightest thing in any room she entered. She saw the world as a puzzle to be solved, always looking for patterns, always believing that if you could just find the right equation, everything would make sense. His voice roughened. She believed in me when she shouldn't have, married me despite what I am, gave me Valentina despite the danger. Despite what you are? He turned. Those black eyes met hers, and for a moment, the mask slipped entirely. You know what I am, Miss March. You've seen the guards, the gates, the way my staff moves around me like I might explode. His jaw tightened. I am not a good man. I've done things that would horrify you. But I loved my wife, and I love my daughter. Whatever else I am, that has never been a lie. The honesty of it stole her breath. This man, this dangerous, powerful, terrifying man, had just handed her a piece of himself, unvarnished, undefended. Valentina knows, Celia heard herself say. About the danger. She understands more than you think. Matteo went still. What do you mean? She should show him the note. Should tell him that his daughter was drowning in fear she couldn't voice, that the silence wasn't just grief, but terror. But Valentina chose that moment to look up. Her golden eyes found Celia's, and in them was a plea as clear as any words. Not yet. Please. The drawings, Celia said instead. They're not random. They tell stories. And some of those stories are heavy. She's processing more than her mother's death. Can you help her? I'm trying. She held his gaze. But I need to understand what she's processing. All of it. Not just the grief. The silence stretched between them. Celia watched the war play out across his features, the part of him that wanted to protect his secrets, and the part that would do anything for his daughter. The Barones, he said finally, a rival family. They've been pushing into our territory for years, legitimate businesses on the surface, but underneath? He shook his head. Lucia was killed in a car accident. That's the official story. But I know, it was them. I just can't prove it. Celia's stomach dropped. You think they murdered your wife? I think they tried to murder me, and she was in the wrong car at the wrong time. His voice was ice over agony. The attack meant for me killed the only pure thing in my life. And now they're circling again, testing defenses, making threats. His hands clenched at his sides. Valentina saw the car that night. She was in the back seat. She watched her mother. He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Celia looked at the little girl surrounded by colored blocks, building patterns from chaos, processing horrors no child should know. The note made terrible sense now. Please save Daddy. A daughter who'd watched her mother die, terrified of watching it happen again. I'm staying, Celia said. The words surprised her, but they felt right. Inevitable. Whatever is happening here, I'm staying until she's ready to find her voice again. Something shifted in Matteo's expression. Not relief. He was too controlled for that. But something close. You don't know what you're agreeing to. Probably not. She met his eyes without flinching. But that little girl needs someone in her corner who isn't afraid of what's lurking in the shadows. I'm choosing to be that person. Even knowing what I am? Especially knowing what you are. She moved closer to Valentina, settling onto the floor beside her, picking up a block in silent offering. Because whatever you are out there, in here, you're just a father who's terrified of losing his daughter, and that's something I can work with. Matteo watched her, really watched her, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical touch. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "I get that a lot." She didn't look up from the blocks Valentina was now arranging around her hands. "Usually right before someone underestimates me." The ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone, but real. "I don't think I'll make that mistake." He left without another word, and Celia was left alone with a silent child and the growing certainty that she'd just stepped into something far bigger than a job. Valentina's small hand found hers, squeezing once. When Celia looked down, the little girl was watching her with those ancient golden eyes. And in them, for the first time, Celia saw something that looked like hope. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday, 6 weeks into Celia's stay. She'd learned Valentina's rhythms by then. The way she woke early and stood at the window watching the sunrise, the way she arranged her crayons by color temperature rather than shade, the way she pressed closer to Celia during thunderstorms but pulled away if anyone mentioned it afterward. They were in the garden that afternoon, surrounded by roses Lucia had apparently planted years ago. Valentina liked it here. Celia had noticed her shoulders dropping, her breathing easing, whenever they stepped outside the house's oppressive grandeur. "Your mama's roses are beautiful," Celia said, not expecting a response. She never expected responses. That was the point. "The red ones are my favorite, but I bet she liked the yellow ones. They're happy." Valentina's hand stilled on the petal she was touching. Her golden eyes darted to Celia's face, then away. And then, so quietly, Celia almost missed it. Pink. One word. Barely a whisper. But it was there. Real and present and miraculous. Celia kept her face neutral, her body language unchanged. Any reaction could spook her, could send her retreating back into silence for weeks. "Pink was her favorite?" Celia asked softly. A tiny nod. Then nothing. Valentina returned to her examination of the roses, and the moment passed like a butterfly landing and lifting off again. But it had happened. After 18 months of near total silence, Valentina had chosen to speak. Celia waited until the little girl was settled with Maria for lunch before finding Matteo in his study. She closed the door behind her, and something in her expression must have shown because he was on his feet immediately. "What happened? Is she—" She spoke. Celia couldn't keep the smile from her voice. One word. "In the garden. About her mother." Matteo went still. She watched the emotions cascade across his face. Hope, disbelief, desperate joy, and something that looked almost like fear. "What did she say?" "I mentioned that her mother probably liked the yellow roses. Valentina said pink." Celia stepped closer, unable to contain her own excitement. "It's not much. It might be weeks before she speaks again. But she chose to communicate, Matteo. She chose to correct me, to share something about her mother. That's enormous." He moved without warning. One moment he was behind his desk, and the next his arms were around her, crushing her against his chest in an embrace that felt like drowning and salvation at once. "Thank you." His voice was wrecked, muffled against her hair. "Thank you. Thank you." Celia should pull away, should remember the boundaries, the professionalism, the 100 reasons this was inappropriate. But he was shaking. This man who commanded armies, who made enemies tremble, shaking in her arms because his daughter had said one word. She held on. "This is the beginning," she said softly. "Not the end. There's still so much work to do." "I know." He pulled back just enough to look at her, and she saw the tears he wasn't quite hiding. "But for 18 months, I've had nothing. No hope, no progress. Just watching her disappear a little more every day." His hands cupped her face, and the intimacy of it stole her breath. "You gave me hope, Celia. I don't know how to—" "Don't." She caught his wrists, holding him steady. Don't thank me yet. We're not done. No. His eyes searched hers, dark and burning with something she wasn't ready to name. We're not. The air between them thickened. She felt the pull of him, the warmth, the intensity, the devastating vulnerability he showed only to her. His thumb traced her cheekbone, feather-light, and every rational thought fled her mind. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. I know. I work for you. I know. Your daughter is the only reason I'm not kissing you right now. His voice dropped to something rough and wanting. Because she needs you. And I won't do anything that might take you away from her. The restraint of it, the choice to put his daughter first even while his hands trembled against her skin, undid her completely. When this is over, she heard herself say. When she's better. When the danger passes. When this is over, he agreed. A promise. A vow. I'll wait as long as it takes. He released her, stepping back, and the loss of his warmth felt like winter. I should go, Celia said. I should. Valentina will be done with lunch soon. Go. But his eyes followed her to the door, burning with everything unsaid. I'll be here. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of progress and patience. Valentina spoke again. Single words, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, always about her mother. Pink roses. Mama's song. The story about stars. Each fragment was a treasure, a piece of a puzzle Celia was slowly assembling. The drawings changed, too. Less red, more colors. Still heavy, still processing, but with glimpses of something softer bleeding through the darkness. And the note, "Please save Daddy," never appeared again, though Celia found other messages scattered through Valentina's art. Men in shadows, cars with bright lights, a small figure with golden hair hiding, always hiding. She sees everything, Celia told Matteo one evening. They'd fallen into a routine, tea in his study after Valentina went to bed, discussing the day's progress, pretending the tension between them wasn't threatening to combust. The guards. The tension. The threats you think you're hiding. Children are sponges. They absorb what adults think they're protecting them from. I've tried to shield her. I know. But she was in the car when her mother died. She's already seen the worst thing. Everything else is just confirmation that the world is dangerous. Celia set down her cup. She needs to feel safe. Actually safe. Not performatively safe. She needs to know that the people she loves aren't going to disappear. And if I can't guarantee that, then we work with what we have. She held his gaze. Right now, what she has is you and me. 2 people who show up every day. 2 people who don't leave. That's more than you think. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. I never expected you. I get that a lot too. No. He leaned forward, and the candlelight caught the silver at his temples, the exhaustion carved into his features. I mean, I never expected to meet someone who could see all of this, the violence, the secrets, the ugliness, and still choose to stay. Who could look at my daughter and see a child instead of a casualty? Who could look at me and see a father? She finished. I see a father who would burn the world to protect his daughter. There's nothing ugly about that. His hand found hers across the table, held on like she was the only solid thing in a world determined to destroy him. Stay, he said, not just for Valentina. Stay for me. Matteo dash dash. I know we said we'd wait. I know there are reasons this is complicated. But I need you to know that when this is over, when the Baronis are handled and my daughter is whole again, I want you here. Not as her therapist, as something else. something more. The words settled into her chest and took root. Ask me again, she said. When it's over, I'll give you my answer then. Is that a yes? It's a possibility. She squeezed his hand. Right now, that's the best I can offer. He brought her knuckles to his lips, pressed a kiss against her skin that felt like a brand. I'll take it. The attack came 3 nights later. Celia woke to screaming. Valentina's screaming, high and raw and terrified. She was out of bed and running before her mind fully registered the alarms shrieking through the house, the gunfire erupting somewhere below, the chaos that had finally breached the fortress walls. She reached the nursery to find Maria unconscious on the floor, blood seeping from a wound on her head, and Valentina gone. The window was open, a ladder propped against the outside wall. They'd taken her. Celia's vision went white with terror. She screamed for Matteo, screamed for guards, screamed until her throat tore and her voice gave out. He found her in the nursery, surrounded by the aftermath of his worst nightmare. His face was bloodless, his eyes wild, his control shattered entirely. They have her. The words came out broken. The Baronis have my daughter. And then his phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold, triumphant, demanding things Celia couldn't hear. But she watched Matteo's face as he listened, watched the terror transform into something darker, more dangerous. Where? He snarled. Then, if you touch her, if you harm a single hair. The call ended. Matteo stood motionless, a statue of compressed fury and devastation. Where? Celia grabbed his arm. Matteo, where is she? The old Barone warehouse. By the docks. His voice was ice. They want the evidence I have against them. They want me to come alone. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. He finally looked at her, and she saw death in his eyes. But they have my daughter. I'll walk into 1,000 traps to get her back. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. She knows my voice. She trusts me. Celia grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. If she's scared, if she's retreated into herself, I might be the only person who can reach her. You need me. The war in his eyes was terrible to witness. Father against protector. Love against logic. If something happens to you, then it happens to me. She held his gaze. But I'm not letting that little girl face this alone. Not after everything we've built. Matteo stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, kissed her hard and desperate, and released her just as quickly. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, I'll consider it. His laugh was broken, beautiful, impossible woman. You like it? God help me, I do. They moved toward the door, toward the cars, toward whatever horror waited in the darkness. And Celia, who'd come here to heal a broken child, prepared to fight for her life. The warehouse loomed against the night sky like a rotting corpse. Celia pressed against the cold metal of the car door as they pulled into the shadow of a crumbling wall. Around them, Matteo's men fanned out in silent formation, more than the Barones had demanded, positioned at intervals she couldn't see but knew were there. They're expecting me alone, Matteo said, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. But they're not stupid. They'll have snipers, backup, an exit strategy. His jaw tightened. And they'll have Valentina somewhere I can't reach her without giving them what they want. What do they want? Evidence. Files that connect them to a dozen murders, including Lucia's. His voice was ice. I've been building a case for 18 months, waiting for the right moment to destroy them legally, the way Marco... He stopped, swallowed. The way my brother would have wanted. Celia's heart clenched. Even now he was trying to be better. even with his daughter's life hanging in the balance. I'm going in through the front, Matteo continued. You'll wait here until my men secure a secondary entrance. When it's clear, they'll bring you to Valentina. And if it's not clear, then you leave. His eyes found hers in the darkness, burning with everything he couldn't say. You take a car, and you drive, and you don't look back. Matteo dash dash. Promise me. His hand caught her jaw, tilting her face toward his. Promise me that if this goes wrong, you'll survive. Someone needs to remember her. Remember us. The words cracked something open in her chest. She kissed him. Hard, desperate. A promise and a prayer wrapped into one. I'll wait, she said against his lips, but not forever, and not if she needs me. He didn't argue, just looked at her with those dark, devastating eyes and slipped into the night. The minutes that followed were the longest of Celia's life. She watched from the shadows as Matteo approached the warehouse entrance, hands raised, alone. Watched as the massive doors opened and swallowed him whole. Listened to the silence that followed, broken only by her own ragged breathing. Then, gunfire, shouting. The unmistakable chaos of a plan gone wrong. Celia didn't think. She moved. The secondary entrance Matteo's men had secured was a rusted door hanging off its hinges. She slipped through, ignoring the guard who hissed at her to stop, and found herself in a maze of corroded machinery and shadows. The gunfire was coming from somewhere above. She followed the sound, climbing metal stairs that groaned under her weight, her heart pounding so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. A corridor, doors lining both sides, and at the end, a sliver of light bleeding from a room that echoed with a child's crying. Valentina. Celia ran. She burst through the door to find a scene from her worst nightmares. Valentina huddled in the corner, her golden eyes enormous with terror, her small body shaking. Two men flanked her, guards, weapons drawn, and in front of them stood a silver-haired man whose smile made Celia's blood curdle. Ah, the man's voice was silk over steel. You must be the therapist. I've heard so much about you. Let her go. Celia's voice came out steadier than she felt. She's a child. She has nothing to do with this. On the contrary, she has everything to do with this. The man, Barone it had to be, stepped closer to Valentina, who flinched away. Her father seems to think he can destroy my family. That evidence he's been gathering, it exists because people are willing to talk. But people stop talking when they understand the consequences. She's 5 years old. Old enough to send a message? Barone's smile widened. Besides, I'm not going to hurt her. Not permanently. Just enough to ensure her father's cooperation. Valentina's eyes found Celia's across the room. In them was a terror so profound it stole Celia's breath, but beneath it, something else. Recognition, trust, a desperate, wordless plea. I'm here, Celia mouthed. I'm not leaving. Step away from her. Celia moved into the room, drawing attention to herself, away from the child. You want to send a message? Use me. I'm the one who's been helping Conti. I'm the one who's been brave. Barone cut her off, amused. But stupid. You're nobody. A hired help. Killing you sends no message at all. Then you don't know Matteo very well. The words hung in the air. Barone's eyes narrowed, reassessing her with new interest. Is that so? He stepped toward her, away from Valentina. You think you mean something to him? You think a man like Conti cares about anyone but himself? I think he cares about his daughter, and I think... Celia shifted slightly, positioning herself between Barone and the child. I think he's about to come through that door and make you regret every decision you've ever made. As if summoned, the wall exploded. Mateo came through the breach like an avenging angel, covered in dust and blood, his men flanking him in a wave of controlled violence. The guards by Valentina went down before they could raise their weapons. Barone stumbled backward, his composure finally cracking. "Conti, you took my daughter." Mateo's voice was barely human. He advanced on Barone with murder in his eyes. "You threatened her. In my house. With my blood. It's business. It was business when you killed my wife." Mateo raised his gun. "Now it's personal." "Daddy." The word, small, trembling, impossible, froze everyone in place. Valentina stood in the corner, tears streaming down her face, her golden eyes fixed on her father. Her hands were shaking, her voice was shaking, but she was speaking. "Daddy, don't." Mateo's gun wavered. His eyes found his daughter, and Celia watched the war play out across his features, the rage demanding blood, the love that transcended everything else. "Baby girl," Mama said. Valentina's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "Mama said don't be like them. She said be good. Be good, Daddy. Please." The silence was absolute. Even Barone seemed frozen, watching this impossible moment unfold. Celia moved, crossed to Valentina, scooped the little girl into her arms, held her close. Those small arms wrapped around her neck, that trembling body pressed against her chest. "You spoke," Celia whispered, tears streaming down her own face. "Oh, sweetheart, you spoke." "I had to." Valentina's voice was ragged, unused to forming so many words. "I had to save Daddy. Like the note. You found my note?" "I found it, baby. I found it." "Is he—" Valentina pulled back to look at her father. "Is he going to be bad?" All eyes turned to Mateo. He stood motionless, gun still raised, Barone cowering before him. The choice hung in the air. Vengeance or mercy, monster or man. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered the weapon. "No." His voice was rough with emotion. "No, baby. I'm going to be good. Just like Mama said." He crossed to them in 3 strides, pulling both Celia and Valentina into his arms. The little girl sobbed against his chest, really sobbed, the dam finally breaking, and Mateo held her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry, Piccola. I should have protected you. I should have—" "You came." Valentina's small hand found his face. "You always come." Behind them, Mateo's men secured Barone and his remaining guards. Sirens wailed in the distance. The authorities Mateo had apparently summoned, the legal destruction he'd been building toward for 18 months, finally set in motion. "The evidence," one of his men reported. "It's being transmitted to the FBI as we speak. The Barones are finished." Mateo nodded once, not looking away from his daughter. "Get them out of here. Let the law handle the rest." "Sir?" "I said let the law handle it." His voice hardened, then softened as he looked at Valentina. "I made a promise. I'm keeping it." They walked out of the warehouse together, Mateo carrying Valentina, his free hand clasped in Celia's. The night air was cold and clean, washing away the smell of blood and gunpowder. "You came for me," Valentina said, her eyes finding Celia's. "I knew you would. Always." Celia brushed the hair from that small, solemn face. "I'll always come for you." "And Daddy?" "Him too." She looked at Mateo, saw the tears he wasn't trying to hide. "We're a team now. The 3 of us." Valentina nodded, satisfied, and laid her head on her father's shoulder. "I'm tired," she murmured. "Can we go home?" "Yes, baby." Mateo's voice cracked. "We can go home." They climbed into the waiting car, Valentina between them, her small hands holding theirs. And as the warehouse disappeared behind them, as the sirens grew louder, and the night began to fade, Celia understood that everything had changed. The silence had broken. The danger had passed. And somehow, impossibly, they'd become a family. 6 months later, Celia stood in the garden and listened to Valentina tell a story. And then the princess said, "No, I won't run away. I'm going to stay and fight." The little girl's voice was stronger now, still soft, still careful, but present in a way it hadn't been since before her mother died. She sat cross-legged among the pink roses, her golden eyes bright, a stuffed dragon clutched in her lap. And the dragon helped her? Because dragons aren't always bad, Celia. Sometimes they're just scared. "That's a very wise princess," Celia said, settling onto the grass beside her. "Did she win?" "Of course she won." Valentina looked at her like she was being silly. She had people who loved her. That's how you win. The simplicity of it, the absolute certainty in that small voice, made Celia's throat tighten. This child, who had seen horrors no one her age should know, who had retreated into silence to survive, had somehow emerged with a faith in love that defied everything. Is that what the dragon taught her? No. Valentina leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. That's what Mama taught me. Before she went to the stars. The words landed soft and sacred. Lucia had been coming up more in Valentina's conversations, memories surfacing like treasures from a shipwreck, painful but precious. The therapist in Celia recognized it as healing. The woman in her recognized it as grace. Your mama was very smart. I know. Valentina nodded solemnly. That's why I picked you. Because you're smart like her. And because you make Daddy smile. You picked me? I asked for you. In my head. She tapped her temple. Before you came. I saw you in a dream, and I asked Mama to send you. Those golden eyes held Celia's with unsettling clarity. And then you came. Celia didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she believed in dreams that summoned strangers or mothers who watched from the stars. But she believed in this child. This miraculous, resilient, extraordinary child who had pulled her into a world she never expected and given her a family she never knew she needed. I'm glad I came, she said finally. Me too. Valentina returned to her dragon, adjusting its tiny wings. You're staying forever, right? That's the plan. Good. Because I already told the roses they're expecting you. The Barone Empire had collapsed completely. Trials, convictions, the systematic dismantling of a criminal organization that had terrorized the city for generations. Matteo's evidence, combined with testimony from those finally brave enough to speak, had ensured that the men responsible for Lucia's death would never see freedom again. He'd stepped back from much of the business in the months since, delegated to trusted lieutenants, spent more time in the garden, in the nursery, at the breakfast table where Valentina now chattered through every meal like she was making up for 18 months of silence. You've changed him, Maria told Celia one afternoon. The nanny had returned after recovering from her injury, though her role had shifted. More household manager than caretaker, now that Valentina had attached herself to Celia like a small, determined shadow. I've worked for this family for 20 years. I've never seen him like this. Like what? Happy. Maria smiled. He didn't know how to be happy before. Not really. Not even with Lucia. There was always something dark in him, some weight he carried. But you and that little girl, you've lightened him somehow. Celia thought about that as she walked through the estate that evening, this fortress that had become home, these halls that no longer felt like a prison. Matteo had changed. The guards were still present, the security still tight, but the tension had eased. Laughter echoed where silence used to reign. She found him in his study, papers spread before him, reading glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look almost ordinary, almost safe. "You're staring," he said, without looking up. "I'm admiring." That drew a smile. Real, warm, the kind she'd worked so hard to earn. "That's my line." "I'm stealing it." She crossed to his desk, perching on the edge. "Valentina told me a story today, about a princess and a dragon. Did the princess win?" "She did. Because she had people who loved her." Matteo set down his papers, removing his glasses to look at her properly. In the lamplight, with exhaustion softened by contentment, he looked younger than she'd ever seen him. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. "That's exactly how you win." "Is that what we did? Win?" "I think so." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I spent years fighting wars I couldn't end, carrying guilt I couldn't shed. And then you appeared, this impossible woman who looked at my broken daughter and saw someone worth saving, who looked at me and saw a father," she finished. "A man worth believing in. That." His voice roughened. "And something else, I hope. Something more." Celia's heart stuttered. "Matteo." "Wait." He rose from his chair, moving around the desk to stand before her, close enough to touch, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his body. "I had this whole plan. Dinner, candles, Valentina helping me with the words because apparently I'm not romantic enough on my own." "She told you that?" "Several times, with great disappointment." His mouth quirked, then sobered. "But I can't wait. I've been waiting for 6 months. I've been waiting, I think, my whole life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Celia forgot how to breathe. "This was Lucia's," he said, opening it to reveal a ring that caught the lamplight, a single sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and timeless. "She left it for Valentina, for when she was grown. But last week, Valentina brought it to me. Said Mama would want you to have it. Said Mama told her so in a dream." Tears blurred Celia's vision. "Matteo, I love you." The words came out rough, cracked, impossibly vulnerable. "I love you in ways I didn't know I was capable of loving. You saved my daughter when I couldn't reach her. You stayed when any rational person would have run. You looked at the darkest parts of me and chose to see light instead." He lowered himself to one knee, and this man, this powerful, dangerous, devastating man, knelt before her like she was the one with all the power. "Marry me, Celia. Be Valentina's mother. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that your faith in me wasn't misplaced." She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hand trembling as he slid the ring onto her finger. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Matteo. 1,000 times yes." He surged to his feet and kissed her, deep and claiming and full of everything words couldn't capture. She kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, her heart so full it threatened to burst. "Finally!" They broke apart to find Valentina in the doorway, bouncing on her toes, her face split by the widest grin Celia had ever seen. "You were supposed to wait upstairs," Matteo said, but he was laughing. "I got tired of waiting." She ran to them, arms outstretched, and they caught her together, lifting her between them, this child who had brought them together, who had broken her silence to save her father, who had somehow known that Celia was coming before she arrived. "Does this mean you're my mama now?" Valentina asked, her golden eyes searching Celia's face. "If you want me to be." "I always wanted you to be." She pressed her small hand to Celia's cheek. "Since the first day, when you drew the cat and didn't try to make me talk." "How did you know? That first day?" "Because you saw me." Valentina's voice was simple, certain. "Everyone else saw a problem. But you saw me." Celia pulled her close, burying her face in that dark hair, breathing in the scent of roses and childhood and home. "I'll always see you," she promised. Always. The wedding was small, intimate, held in the garden among Lucia's roses on an afternoon golden with summer light. Valentina served as flower girl, scattering petals with such serious concentration that the guests couldn't help but smile. Maria cried through the entire ceremony. Even Matteo's men, hardened soldiers who'd seen violence Celia couldn't imagine, looked suspiciously bright-eyed as their boss exchanged vows with the woman who'd healed his daughter. "I promise to see you," Celia said, her hands clasped in Matteo's, her voice steady despite the tears. "Not the empire you've built or the power you hold. You, the father who would burn the world for his child. The man who chose mercy when revenge would have been easier. The person who trusted me with the most precious thing in his life." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to keep seeing you every day for the rest of our lives." "And I promise to be worthy of being seen," Matteo replied, his voice rough with emotion. "To be the man you believe I am. To protect you and Valentina with everything I have. To choose good when evil would be easier." His eyes glistened. "To make your faith in me the truest thing I've ever earned." When they kissed, Valentina cheered so loudly that birds scattered from the nearby trees. That night, after the guests had departed and the estate had settled into peaceful silence, Celia stood on the terrace and watched the stars emerge. Valentina was asleep in her bed, exhausted from the day's excitement. Matteo's arm wrapped around Celia's waist, pulling her back against his chest. "No regrets?" he asked. "None." She leaned into his warmth. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But Valentina tells me that's not how it works. That we had to be ready first." "She's very wise. She's her mother's daughter." His voice softened. "Both of her mothers." The words settled into Celia's heart and took root there. This acknowledgement that she wasn't replacing Lucia, but joining her. Adding to the love that already existed rather than erasing what came before. "I found her note, you know," Celia said quietly. "That first day. The one that said, 'Please save Daddy.'" Matteo went still. "You never told me." "It wasn't mine to tell. It was her secret. Her way of processing fear she couldn't voice." Celia turned in his arms, her hands framing his face. "But I think that note saved all of us. It made me understand what she was carrying. It made me stay when I should have run. And now? Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She kissed him softly. "We all are." They stood together as the moon rose over the garden, silver light washing over the roses Lucia had planted, the home they'd built, the family they'd become. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges. But they would face them together. This therapist and her mafia boss. This mother and daughter who had found each other against impossible odds. Celia thought about the woman she'd been 7 months ago, desperate, struggling, certain that happiness was for other people. She'd walked into a fortress expecting a job and found a family instead. Some love stories begin with grand gestures. Some begin with whispered words. Theirs began with a scrawled note from a child who couldn't speak. A plea written in crayon. A secret hope pressed onto paper. A message that changed everything. "Please save Daddy." Valentina had written those words out of fear. But what she'd really been asking for was someone to save them all. And somehow, impossibly, Celia had answered. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.